Nigel Farage warning of a communist takeover of Britain's education system. A very, very serious story that has already had a huge response online, and rightly so. As Nigel Farage tweeted yesterday, Chinese billionaires with direct links to the CCP are buying up British schools and flooding the curriculum with their propaganda. As he says, this communist takeover of our education system must be stopped. Following this up, in a Mail article entitled "A Communist Takeover of Our Schools That Britain Must End at Once," he says it extends way beyond buying up mineral assets or Western telecommunication systems. There's a cultural dimension that reeks of propaganda and indoctrination. Not content with financing some British universities, we now learn that Chinese companies, Nigel writes, directly linked to the highest ranks of the Communist Party have serious financial interests in our schools. The full report in the Mail on Sunday today is that British schools are selling out to Beijing. Not only are private institutions being bought by Chinese firms, but some are giving lessons that are a threat to free speech. Hundreds, the Mail of Sunday report, of independent schools left in dire financial straits by the pandemic are being targeted by Chinese investors. Experts anticipate a feeding frenzy as firms, including some run by high-ranking members of the ruling Chinese Communist Party, seek to expand their influence over Britain's education system. 17 schools already said to be owned by Chinese companies, but that number set to rocket. And an investigation by the Mail on Sunday, among other things, finding that 9 of the 17 schools under Chinese control are owned by firms whose founders or bosses are among China's most senior Communist Party members. Now, on a broader point, I find it pretty striking now how reliant on foreign funding British universities have made themselves. Of course, that ability when it comes to universities to charge a lot more for foreign students than British students for courses has meant, as the Times report in February 2019, UK students squeezed out of Cambridge and Oxford. The number of undergraduates studying at Oxford and Cambridge has fallen by 1,000 in the past decade, according to official figures. There are 7% fewer home students at Oxford and 5% fewer at Cambridge than in 2007-2008. In the same period, the number of foreign undergraduates rose by 51% at Oxford and 65% at Cambridge. Follow-up report the Times did in June 2020, when it comes to foreign funding in universities, is that lucrative foreign students are taking Oxbridge places from state pupils. An increase in overseas students at Oxford and Cambridge universities has reduced the number of UK applicants getting a place. It means that in spite of significant efforts to increase the number of state school pupils winning a place there, the figure has not risen for 20 years. Oxbridge admissions from state schools peaked in 2002 at 3,343. In 2018, the number was 3,166. And although a slightly different point, it does show you the influence now, and I would say the increasing reliance in the British education system on foreign funding is something that needs really to be looked at. Nigel Farage highlighting specifically this issue now. Wealthy Chinese individuals with links to the Communist Party buying up British schools. Let me know what you make of this, guys, and if you haven't seen what Nigel's had to say about this, here it is.
I said at the start of the year that with Brexit done, albeit imperfectly, I was going to focus as much as I could on China, or in particular, the Chinese Communist Party. Here is a story that as yet has not been told. We know that China has a Belt and Road policy led by President Xi, and that the aim is very simple. It is world economic domination. We also knew that British universities were receiving quite large sums of Chinese money. But this story has been completely untold up until this moment in time, and it is that the Chinese are now buying up British schools. I hadn't heard this until a few days ago. It started back in 2014, and it's now gathering pace. Why is it happening? Well, the independent sector, the private sector in Britain, educates about 7% of our children. But school fee inflation has been so rapid over the last few years that many of them have got real financial difficulties. The boarding schools have made up for this by getting lots and lots of Chinese students to come and pay top whack fees in this country. All of that we knew. What we didn't know was that a series of Chinese companies are busy buying up schools. Now, you might say, isn't it better that Chinese money buys up these independent schools, some of which have been around for centuries? Isn't it better that happens than they actually close down? Well, what I'm about to tell you will make you realise just how sinister this is. One company, for example, a company known as Bright Scholar, they have bought Bournemouth Collegiate. They bought St Michael's in Llanelli. They bought Bosworth Independent. They bought the Cats Colleges, a series of language colleges around the country. But when you look, who owns Bright Scholar? Well, it's run by the richest woman in Asia, whose father is a senior figure in the Chinese Communist Party. And you can go on and on and on and see every one of these companies that is buying up British schools has a direct link to the Chinese Communist Party. And what are they actually teaching? Well, for example, the Confucius Institute now has its materials in 29 of our university campuses and 148 of our schools. And they're encouraging youngsters to go on apps such as Go Chinese, where, with basic Mandarin, they can see President Xi giving them a potted history of China and all the great things that it's done and continues to do. It is an utterly sanitized view of China in the past and China today. No mention, of course, of what's happening to the Uyghurs. No mention, of course, what's happening to democracy in Hong Kong. These people are being taught that China is the future. They are being literally indoctrinated by the Chinese Communist Party. I think this is an absolutely massive story. I think it's one that needs to be told. I'm delighted that the Mail on Sunday have really gone for this in such a big way. You can read it now online. They've done very extensive research on this. And I think that Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, needs to answer a question today. Are we going to allow young children, young adults in our country to be indoctrinated by the Chinese Communist Party, or are we going to put a stop to this? This isn't just about an economic takeover of the West. It's about a cultural takeover too. I think it's one of the most sinister things I've seen coming from China. I'm pleased this story is now out.